Welcome back to Fujitsu World Tour London 2018, where we continue to bring you the Facebook Lives by Vertical. Up next, we're going to look at hybrid IT, the age-old debate of legacy systems versus the new. How do we balance all that out? With me to discuss this, we've got Sanjeev Kamboj, head of pre-sales and architecture at Fujitsu.
That's right, CJ.
Where do businesses start with this? Because, I mean, this is quite a conversation in itself, isn't it?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here. And it's a great question. It's a question that we've been looking at for the last, say, 3 or 4 years, really. We really saw this as a sort of big shift in the marketplace a few years ago, and that's why we launched in the marketplace our proposition, which is around hybrid IT. And it really was to create the perfect balance of investments in what we kind of deem, or the market deems as robust IT, as well as the modern world and the way the world is moving towards modern digital infrastructures exhibited through cloud services.
Okay.
And really what we wanted to do was to address that complex problem, because it is a reasonably complex problem, because you've invested heavily in sort of legacy technology which actually works and it serves a purpose. And how do I marry that up with the sort of the drive and the need to move to faster IT? So what we originally, sort of the way we originally looked at some of these problems, and we still have these situations today, was that you can't suddenly switch off legacy IT, because a lot of the core systems, certainly for government, public sectors around the world, banks, there's half a dozen banks here in front of us, a lot of these big industries require robust IT. What we then started to talk about in terms of the perfect balance was that how do we get the best out of legacy infrastructures and marry that up with the modern world. So I think both from a technological perspective and from a business perspective, I think when it comes to moving towards cloud services, CXO types really need to understand what they've got. So we developed a methodology where we really looked into, what do I actually have today? Where could it go? What could be the most appropriate migration pathway in terms of the target architecture? And how do I make that balance itself out over an ROI and a business case over however many years you want to actually then run that service for? And that was our initial approach in terms of grappling with this problem.
You mentioned ROI. That brings us lovely into the boardroom, because I can imagine it's a common problem that if the technologists in the business are struggling to answer this question, then surely the CEO isn't addressing this problem at the moment, and that's probably not that they don't want to. They might not understand it.
So really, really good observation, actually. And I think if you look at sort of the gestation of most businesses, they've either acquired companies or they're dissolving various companies, so they're in a state of flux. And that state of flux is very hard to keep a direct handle on exactly what my assets are, where they are, and how utilized they are. So we developed a methodology, and we actually have it as our transformation service, where we do quite a deep dive in terms of what an organization has today. So what is actually in use, where it's in use, who's it being used by, where, when, and how. We then look at that in terms of, we have a very, very good understanding of the sort of core business. We then build an ROI case, which then looks at the core assets, looks at the strategy of the organization. So it's a board level conversation, it's business strategy, and we start to map out where these initial platforms could go, because sometimes not everything is appropriate to move to a cloud service, and hence we have the mix of both legacy technology and modern digital cloud technologies. And we start to map that out and then really sit down with the business at a board level to figure out, is this really the kind of the optimal pathway, and then have a migration pathway for those workloads.
What are the big challenges to businesses delivering on this? I mean, and I guess that probably differs between the enterprise organizations and the smaller, more agile businesses.
Sure, yeah. So very, very good question. So smaller, more agile services, what we found, don't really have a lot of the heritage IT issue. So they're kind of more born in the cloud organizations, which can then become more sort of cloud native businesses, can start to consume cloud services very, very quickly and have a very sort of quick go-to-market. And we can certainly help, certainly with the relationships that we have now with the likes of Microsoft, the new announcements that we've made with the likes of VMware, to really take those organizations to the right cloud service provider, and Amazon Web Services as well. The larger organizations have a much more broader set of problems. They obviously have legacy IT, which has to be robust 24/7. They also want to move to cloud services. They have an area that they're looking at right now in terms of taking advantage of cloud native applications, using things like containerization, Docker. How do I actually get that moving, as well as perhaps meet legislation, for example? So banks have to meet rigorous legislation. Governments have to provide citizen-centric services. So it's a balancing act of all of these things. If I'm providing payments, for example, how do I make sure PCI DSS works in a heterogeneous environment? So these are just some of the challenges that we see on a pretty much a day-to-day basis, and some of the problems that we're helping organizations navigate through.
So every solution that you deliver has to be bespoke to the client then? It's not one cookie cutter solution?
It's a very good question, actually. So I wouldn't say it's bespoke, but we have methodologies which we can then start to apply through in a sort of factory type process for most appropriate workloads. And I think that's the most important thing. What we find our clients really want is to understand where their target architecture is going to reside, both from a platform perspective, but also from it's the right most appropriate workload with the right cloud service provider, giving them maximum value. That's very important for them. Secondly, what our clients are also asking us for, so this is Fujitsu, is to run that as a fully managed service. And so run that globally often for them as a fully managed service. So on a sort of per virtual machine basis, right down to the virtual machine, can you manage it for me, Fujitsu? And I don't want to have the headache. And the third thing they're asking us for is then, now that it's running in the cloud, can you then transform me? Can I start to take advantage of IoT, AI, blockchain as a service, all these next generational technologies to really digitally transform my business?
Final question. A lot of C-suite operatives will be watching this. If you had one message that you wanted to land with them that they were looking at tomorrow, what would it be?
So I'd say that Fujitsu as an organization, from our engineering heritage, we are deep-rooted engineering, a lot of deep-rooted experience across the globe, particularly in Japan. We are seeing a lot of exportation of that technology, and a lot of firsts that we're doing in Japan around modern technology such as IoT, AI. Blockchain as a service, and we have the ability to now export that, and we're seeing great interest around the exportation of technologies and solutions that we're also creating here in EMEA and then re-exporting that back. So I think our global reach, our partnerships that we've struck with all the cloud service providers, and our capability to do this across the globe is of huge importance, certainly to the CEOs and CIOs that I meet on a fairly regular basis.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.
As is always the case, if you've got any questions about Fujitsu's hybrid offering, drop us a note on any of the social channels. We'll put those questions to the team and we'll be sure to get them addressed. There's lots more to come from Fujitsu World Tour 2018 as we continue to bring you insight by vertical. Plenty more to come.